Welcome back, guys, to the Beyond Condition podcast, the voice of bodybuilding. I am your host, Sarah Parker, and today I am bringing you an episode around essentially post cycle. So, after you have utilized anabolics and how that can feel. So, this came about from a conversation I had, and I don't often get asked really in person what it feels like to use PEDs, steroids, etc. But sometimes in the gym environment, as to previous discussions on the podcast, I do get asked certain questions. Now, this one I thought would be super useful to bring to the podcast because I got asked, how does it feel when you come off anabolics? Now, this is going to be unique to you. We all have different experiences around the use of PEDs, but certainly for me, I don't mind talking about this when I get asked. And if I can ever shed some light on certain things, something like post cycle and how that can feel, it can really, really help you understand your own use and essentially how that feels when you come away from using anabolics. Now, for me personally, I would say I've absolutely noticed quite a big difference in regards to what phase I'm in. So, whether you're in a prep or a diet, whether you're essentially reversing out, whether you're in off season, and when you are using anabolics, this will potentially change how you feel when you come off of anabolics. And that's an important place to start because although we are all unique, there of course is different parts to each phase that would attribute to how you feel when you come off of anabolics. Now, for me personally, I would utilize anabolics across the phases, and it would depend on my timeline and exactly what I'm trying to do in that phase, where my direction and path is heading. And for me, being able to utilize personal anecdote, record data is super, super important. And I believe it's something we should all be doing. Now, this is something that perhaps your coach does on your behalf, as it were. So, what happens when you go on anabolics? What effects you notice from different types of anabolics? Which ones bring a favorable response for you? And of course, looking at potential virilization and masculinization when you are on cycle. Again, this is something that isn't spoken about much in the bodybuilding space from a female standpoint. I don't see a lot of people talking about it. Now, the caveat to that is that, I'm never here going, oh, you should definitely use steroids. I'm not promoting them in any way, which way, shape, or form. I'm actually trying to be with you guys and help you understand the use of PEDs and steroids more. Because if we don't talk about it on an open platform, it takes away that safe space. And that's something that I want to facilitate in the bodybuilding world because we could easily ignore it. We could, it's like an elephant in a room, certain things like this, because it's like if you talk about it, does that promote it? And it doesn't need to. It's how you deliver it and it's how you make the listener and the consumer feel. Because I know so many people that go down this route and absolutely do not understand the effects other than a physique outcome. And this is the point, right? When we are bodybuilders, we are looking for a favorable physique response. So if we go down the assisted route, are we going to be potentially blindsided to, the knock-on effects that could occur? And I've said this before, but you may be a new listener that actually you may not notice effects that aren't, something you're happy with until X amount of cycles in. It's like you could do several cycles of something like Anavar, Masteron, Primo, and not notice any effects in regards to the masculinization. And then you could do a future cycle and you could get an effect that you weren't aware of. Now, if I don't talk about it, you could feel very alone, very isolated, and miseducated, misinformed for sure. And what we need to remember is that this is a choice for you. And whatever you take, yes, it can be under the guidance of a coach or a friend at the gym or whatever. However, you are taking Z compound. So it does fall back to you. And it's a bitter pill to swallow if you do so without understanding that there could be potential effects. Every time I talk about PEDs, pretty much, I also promote having blood work, and that is super important because it's not just visible effects like hair growth. clit enlargement, things that can occur that we would see on the superficial, but it's also the effect on your organs and your internal health. Again, something you may not be aware of. Now, when it comes to post cycle, I'm absolutely, as I said, happy to talk about this. And this was around coming off of Masteron. So I utilized Masteron in my 19-week diet towards the end, so the last portion, and I wanted to see how that would feel using Masteron in a diet because I'd never done that before. So for me, I self-coach and I'm able to utilize compounds, knowing essentially what the effects are and being able to almost experiment on myself. This was a diet, this was not for stage. And, when we put anabolics in, certainly for me, always, every single time, and I've used Anavar, Primo, and Masteron, I notice a scale weight increase. Now, when I did this in the 19-week diet, my scale weight ticked up, and then it was very hard to budge. I was in a big deficit, and the scale weight moved a kilogram in 5 weeks. Now, could that be frustrating? Absolutely. So the psychological effect can sometimes be pretty hard when you don't see the scale weight move, but this is where, for sure, when you are in the assisted realms, we are always looking at your physique outcome. Now, I got harder, drier. I was able to facilitate some pumps in the gym, not many because there was not much food going in. And absolutely, my training performance, I was able to maintain that for the latter portion of my diet. So on cycle, I was feeling a little bit more well-being and feeling overall that little bit better, being able to maintain training performance, not necessarily increasing training performance because of the deficit. However, the Masteron did give me that, little boost where I was able to feel like I could last a set rather than hanging out my arse, as we often feel in a huge deficit. Now, when I came off cycle, this is something that I always feel anyway when I'm going to come off anabolics. I get that sort of, my superpower is being removed. Now, you know me, guys, I promote that we do focus on what our risk reward is and being able to situate and timeline exposures. So for me, 2 to 3 exposures a year of around 8 weeks is what I do. So if I was in this, I've got to take my anabolics out now, and I don't want to lose that superpower. I like feeling better. I like being able to train harder, recover more as well. That's something that's associated with anabolics. That could leave me in a tricky spot with chasing the dragon. It absolutely could. And that's not something I'm going to ignore either. We often have, when we are getting a positive physique outcome, we often have that attributing to, but I want to keep taking Z compound. For sure we do. And, maybe it doesn't cross your mind, but I'd imagine a lot of you listening are going to go, yeah, I hear you. We also can notice post cycle that there's a bit of a, post cycle depression. We can feel a little bit lower in mood. We can lose, the ability to train as hard. We can feel the superpower being removed. And that can be quite hard to explain in words until you've been there. And again, this is why I want to talk about it. So after my diet, obviously food is going back in. So that's a huge positive because although I'm post cycle, I am then utilizing more food. Obviously, cardio reduces, steps may change, stuff like this. So you're absolutely being able to feel better from not being in such a huge deficit. So that synergy is quite nice because, of course, you're able to come away from the diet and attribute that to, taking yourself out of a deficit. But it does not stop you feeling a little bit strange. You can just feel the gusto is not there as it was. And this is what I was trying to explain when I had the conversation. It's like, it's a bit like that extra bit of stuffing in a teddy has been removed. And this is where, when I talk about post cycle, the difference between the phases, certainly in an off-season setting, I feel like there's much more, personally for me, there's much more of an increase in training performance. And the way I attribute this is because you're already in a good spot in off season, you put the anabolics in, and that adds even more. Now, this can also heighten your sex drive. It can also heighten you're, it's like I want to train. I wouldn't say angry, but you go in the gym and you're like, yeah, I'm fucking here for it. Now, when I've taken anabolics out in an off-season setting, I've personally noticed that I actually feel more of the effects of taking anabolics out. So I do feel lower on energy. It's a bit harder to get through the days. Training feels like you're really having to push that little bit more. It's like, and this is the way I've described it before. It's a bit of a dark cloud. Walking is a little bit. You're training and it's like, oh, a week ago, 2 weeks ago, I was getting PBs every session. And a very good example of this is in this current off season before my mini cut, I was putting like plates on, right, per session. So I was going in the gym and I was PBing all over the place. And it was literally within 2 weeks, the plates were going on. I was feeling on top of the fucking world. And I knew before the mini cut, it would be a good idea to essentially take the anabolics out, have a 2 week period before going into the mini cut to settle into the off season setting without the anabolics in. What I also wanted to do was be able to respond accordingly to feeling like this before in an off season setting to actually go, okay, so rather than take the anabolics out, go straight into a mini cut. I want to be able to have that 2 week buffer period if I'm feeling a little bit shitty, if I'm feeling a bit lower in mood, if training performance is harder to accrue, I've still got food in. But this also allows things like scale weight to be a more, accurate tool. So you can allow essentially the anabolics to come out, have a settling off period, as it were. See if you notice any changes in scale weight, how you feel, and also, for me personally, training is so, so important. So, this allows me to still have food there, still have everything else in line to maintain the training performance that I had when the Masteron was in. Now, this is something people probably don't think about, maybe don't talk about. That for me, a huge goal right now in this mini cut, and it's bloody hard work, I'll tell you that, but I am not willing to sacrifice my training performance in this mini cut. Now, this is where you're going to have to understand your own psychology around training, but also the mindset side of things. I am so hell bent on keeping my gym performance where it is in this mini cut that I will literally do anything in my power to facilitate everything around each and every session. I am not going to be in a diet and let my training performance slip. Now, this is a harsh mini cut. I'm going to get in, get out in 4 weeks. Could I easily on day three, when it hit like a ton of bricks, go, okay, I'll have a subpar session? Of course I could, but I'm not willing to do that. And that is my own training psychology. That is my own purpose in the gym because I've taken anabolics out. I've had that 2 week period. I've then hit a mini cut very, very hard. Now I need to ensure my ducks are in line to be able to get in and out of this mini cut efficiently rather than go into a diet and think, oh, I can't really be bothered here. Training is what it is. For me, bodybuilding is bodybuilding, right? If you don't like the gym, if you don't really, really focus on what you're doing in the gym and your training performance, is bodybuilding the right path? We could easily say, right? And the mindset behind it to go into the session and literally pour everything into it is so important because we are bodybuilders. And that's so crucial for me. Being in this mini cut, no anabolics, just baseline PEDs, I'm not willing to sacrifice my training performance. It's not an option. I will do everything in my power, as I say, to prop up around the sessions to ensure that I am there and I am fucking doing everything in my power to maintain that performance. And I feel like that's a huge message here. You are going to get people in the space that rely on anabolics and stay on anabolics for long periods of time to facilitate training performance along with the physique outcome. As I've described, you get that additional training performance, energy, readiness to train, you get that recovery. So could we easily stay on cycle all year round? Absolutely, we could. Maybe you're listening and you do. And this is part of the scarcity the fear of coming off anabolics is that you're going to lose out on your training performance and, in a sense, your gains. But if you are utilizing set exposures throughout a year, I believe we're going to need to work on the mindset around training and why you are doing this. Yes, we can, of course, monitor training performance, maintain a good level of training performance for you, but can you do better? And this is an opportunity to ask yourself, because in that post cycle period, when you do feel, oh, my superpower is removed, what is going to get you to train as hard as you did when you were on anabolics? Obviously, we've got food, recovery, but it's mindset. What do you want from the gym and what are you willing to put in? And I urge you to think about that, because if you're in this cycle of leaning on anabolics for training performance, it can be a deadly path. We can chase the dragon, as I've mentioned. We can absolutely get into these rabbit holes of almost using it as a crutch. And it's like anything, you can get addicted to any substances, and that includes PEDs. But this is where we need to understand why we are doing this and what is efficacious for our goals. Because when we deal with these periods of time, when we do feel lower in mood, when we do feel training is harder, it's on us to still chase it, to still get after it. And we do have that ability within us. But this comes with working on our own mindset. And that's important because it comes back to self-awareness. And this is what I urge anyone to think about when you are post-cycle, is what is driving you to still get after it. When you feel lower in mood, when you feel things are harder, is it worth speaking to people around you, including your coach? Have you been, prepped for this feeling? Because it's certainly something that I speak to my clients about. I would never, ever neglect that part. I wouldn't just say, oh, take these anabolics and take them out, carry on. Because it is, in my mind, it can be a bit of a dick move, because this is someone's physiological response when you're utilizing a compound. And that comes with almost a trade-off, right? A cost to how that can feel when you come away from anabolics, and it's super important. So I'm glad I got asked this question, really, because I could bring it to you guys and hopefully give you a bit of a mini episode to help your understanding around this. Now, as you know, when I talk about PEDs, when I talk about steroids, if you have questions, I don't want to say, oh, I don't answer any questions. But if you have a coach, it's important for me to make it clear that that is your first port of call. If you are utilizing anabolics and you have a coach that's guiding that, I don't want to step on toes. And that's important for me to make that message very, very clear, because this is something you should be speaking to your coach about. If you want to share how you felt, that you enjoyed this episode, that you'd like me to do more episodes around this topic, absolutely, I'm here. I'm just a message away. You know that, guys. But I need to make that clear, because my space in the industry is not to step on toes, is not to piss people off. It's the complete opposite. I'm here to empower, educate, and resonate with you guys and our community. And that is very, very important to me. So, as I say, if you want to reach out, give me any topic ideas, anything like that, any feedback, it's always well received. And of course, I will speak to you real soon. Hey.